Brian Nugent, we did an interview together. I've known him for a few years. Brian Nugent, who is the author of Marian Apparitions in Ireland, this book, found an incredible text. Once I read this text, I said, "Oh my God, this is absolutely incredible." Because it's about a Eucharistic miracle in Delvin, County Westmeath. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, my family comes from there. My family comes from Clonmorrell, which is behind Delvin, 5 kilometres actually behind this church. And as kids, I vividly remember my father and my uncle bringing me to this church where this Eucharistic miracle happened, and them telling us all about the history. And, we didn't remember half what we were being told. But anyway, I'm just going to read you through this text. I'm going to throw this text out to the world, because maybe there's more information about this. I did reach out to the Diocese of Meath to see, look, do you have any records of this? But, as people know, during the Reformation, a lot of the church records and a lot of church properties and abbeys were destroyed, sadly. So, bishops exiled. So there's very little from this period. So it's interesting to find this text from France. Anyway, I'm just going to read it out for you, because I do think this is important, and it's fascinating for this time period in the church. As I mentioned the other evening with my conversation with Brian Nugent, who comes from the same lands as I come from, Brian found in this book History of Renaissance, Progress and Decadence in the Heresies of that century, printed in 1605. Brian found this incredible account of a Eucharistic miracle in Delvin, County Westmeath. I mean, when I read this, I couldn't get over my joy of reading this, because it mentions a specific place, which is this chapel in Delvin, County Westmeath. St. Mary's. If you're coming in the Mullingar Road into Delvin, and Delvin really is just one long street. If you're coming in the Mullingar Road into Delvin, this was the chapel beside the castle coming in. It would have then become a Church of Ireland, and since it's derelict, and there's a new chapel the other side of the town. Anyway, I said, I'm going to have a stab at translating this text. And once I got the type the letters right, because there is a letter here, consacre, you can see it here, this kind of an F, which is actually an S. Once I got that right, I retyped it out onto Word and was able to translate this text. And all credit goes to Brian Nugent. Brian Nugent is I've been blogging about his book Marian Apparitions in Ireland and Related Phenomena. And Brian has written other books. Shakespeare Was Irish. Really recommend that book. You can get these on Amazon. But fair play to him, because he really made my day when he found this text. I'm just going to read out the translation that I've done. It is incredible, and I was just mulling over this text to try and make some headways into it. So in Hibernia, in Ireland, a theologian named Ian Traverses, I don't know if that's John Travers or Ian Travers, maybe somebody I will uncover who this man is, this theologian, was taken, accused of having written a book in favour of the primacy of St. Peter and his successors. As you would, because this is during the Reformation, late 1500s, early 1600s. Being questioned before judges if he had composed it, he courageously admitted it, showing the 3 fingers which he had written it. Suddenly he was condemned to fire, by which his body was formed. But God willed, by approval of his work, that these 3 fingers be exempted. They must be able to burn them. So much so that they remained whole, and it was never possible to burn them. Since I entered Ireland, Hibernia, I will relate what a Hibernian Catholic told me, very certain in his country and confirmed by heretical witnesses. This is where it goes fascinating. A priest saying Mass secretly in a church had finished, knelt down beside the altar, saying his prayer, after which he rose up and went away, having unthinkably left on the altar a chalice in which there was a consecrated host, which he had purposely kept. After some hours, a heretic bishop named Richard Brady entering the church, accompanied by the Baron of Delvin and his brother, the Baron of Screen. So these three people here mentioned, Bishop Richard Brady, is Bishop Richard Brady, who died in 1607 and who is buried in Multifarnan, not far from there actually. Now they call him a heretic bishop, and I'm just trying to think. Now this text is written in 1607. Why would he be labelled a heretic bishop? Because as far as we are aware, he didn't die that. But you know, if we think back then to the bishops that would have been put under immense pressure by the crown to conform to the new church structures that Henry VIII had introduced, and who his daughter was then obviously very much in favour of, you know, the Church of England, Anglican Church. So this miracle could be massively more important than we even think to the life of this bishop, to the life of those men. The other two people that are mentioned here are the Baron of Delvin and the Baron of Screen. The Baron of Delvin is Christopher Nugent, and the Baron of Screen is William Nugent. And Brian Nugent, who has uncovered this text, he's tons of information about them. And you can also read about them in Elizabeth Hickey's book, The Green Cock Thrice. Anyway, I go on, and several others went straight to the altar, and meeting this chalice, uncovered it. And as he wanted to take the host, it fell out of the chalice onto the altar, where, wanting to take it again, it fell to the other side, fluttering incessantly. But the bishop, whatever dexterity he had, he could not take it, so much so that, having lost both his trouble and his time, seeing this marvel, ordered that this priest be sought, and that he pardoned him, provided that he came to take back his host. The priest came, and suddenly, as he stretched out his sacred hands towards the Eucharist, he took it and put it back in the chalice and carried it where he wanted, with great astonishment to those who saw all this. It may be about 12 years since this happened in the land of this Baron Delvin. In the church of Villa Castri, in the bishopric of Maiden, for the blessed sacrament of the altar, I know a gentleman of the country of Benoge, a Huguenot, whose testimony is irreproachable. Many know him, who has said and afflicted an infinity of times that during these civil wars his father had met in a church a priest who had consecrated the host. One of his soldiers thrust a dagger into the host, from which fountain inflicted great deal of pain. He testifies to having seen it with his own eyes. He is still full of guilt, obstinate as always, in pushing this miracle to the fact that the soldier swore the name of God while striking, as if so soon that a soldier denies God does these wonders. Now, I'm sorry if the translation is a bit butchered here. This is a text that was written over 400 years ago. So it's a text that I struggle to translate, but it's not very, very difficult once you get copied correctly. But I'm just going to leave it here. If anybody else wants to have a stab at the translation, you can go for it. But I thought it was fascinating to see these names written: Richard Brady, the Baron of Delvin, and the Baron of Screen. It's Richard, and they must have been phonetically given. The person that's given that says Richard Brady It's Richard Brady. He was a Franciscan. He died in 1607 and is buried in Multifarnon. And we know that these figures would have been there. So 12 years before this would have been late 1500s. How this arrived to France, it's interesting. But I'm just throwing it out there. I was mulling over myself. Why isn't this more known today? And I'm just going to reflect on that for a second. So there you have that piece of text that I've translated about that miracle in St. Mary's in Delvin. I mean, there was some hypotheses that were going through my mind. Did this strengthen their faith? It must have. It must have impacted the priest, the bishop, Christopher Nugent, William Nugent, and those present. The bishop trying to take the host and not being able to touch it. Was this a time of crisis for the bishop in the church, for the priest in the church? I don't know. As I said, if you want to know more about somebody in that piece of text, William Nugent, the Baron of Screen, will you have the Green Cockatrice? Very interesting book. You also have Brian Nugent's book, which is Shakespeare Was Irish. You can get that. Brian Nugent, who wrote Marian Apparitions. He's doing a ton of studies. I mean, he did the Tomb Babies study as well. So he's doing a ton of research for the church, which is pure gold, really. It's pure gold to be able to read this for me. And fair dues to him, credit to him for getting that text. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I read it. I just couldn't believe it. I said, wow, this is incredible. I mean, the church we know existed, the bishop we know existed, the Baron of Delvin we know existed, the Baron of Screen we know existed. We know so many details about these people, that they lived in that period. This miracle must have happened in the late 1500s. If we think about it, William Nugent, who's mentioned there, the Baron of Screen, he would have, fought for the faith. He was exiled to Rome. He would have witnessed the construction of St. Peter's Cathedral, the dome being built in St. Peter's Cathedral when Pope Gregory XIII was Pope in Rome. And it's all, we have tons and tons of details about the life of William Nugent and his son Richard Nugent, who wrote Cynthia. So we've tons of manuscripts and letters and details. This miracle is fascinating, and I was there thinking, why do we not know about this? Why wasn't it publicized more? Well, if we think back to it, during the Protestant era, the Protestant Reformation, this would have been a big, big deal. Do you want to shine more light on this? Did they want to keep it secret because they didn't want the story being known? Causing more attention on the priest, on the bishop, on Delvin, in a time of a lot of persecution, because during that time you have Bishop Thomas Days, who is the Bishop of Meath, who's also a first cousin of these Nugents. His mother's a Nugent. And he would have stayed with the Nugents during that time, and he was trying to navigate the political upheaval in Ireland. Did they keep this miracle a secret? This thing about the host, moving around the altar when the bishop is trying to take it, it does strike a bell with me. If we think back recently to that Eucharistic miracle in Donegal, where the host flew from one side of the church, where somebody who wasn't consuming the host, it went from their hand back into the ciborium. This is not unknown. This is not unknown. These miracles are not unknown. And I really do think, this text is a fascinating insight into the late 1500s, that time of incredible upheaval in Ireland. Incredible upheaval. For William Nugent to do what he did, to stand his ground on the faith, cost him titles, cost him money, cost him property, cost him Ireland. I mean, he was exiled and then he had to come back to Ireland, you know. And again, Brian Nugent has done beautiful work on collating all of this information. But it makes me understand why so many Irish actually did believe, you know. Certainly in my own family, we have lots of texts of Nugent's defending the faith, and it lends to this now to we understand why it was so important. I mean, for kids in my own family, I know I've letters from my grandfather to my father, and he's always saying, you know, make sure to go to confession, make sure to frequent the sacraments, to go to mass. This is what our family would have been told, and my grandfather would have taught boys how to serve the Latin Mass, to say the Latin prayers. And, you know, certainly as kids, you know, our uncles did talk about the faith. My father, especially my uncle Austin, they did talk to us about the faith, and they did bring us to the places where our families came from. Multifarnon, Delvin, without a doubt, been around Delvin so many times, and other locations around that vicinity, you know. But like it's a fascinating miracle. And so I'll leave that text there. If people looking at this video, look at the text if you can translate a bit more, or if people can get me more information on this, or get more information for Brian on this. It's a fascinating insight into that period. You know, as I always wondered over the years, the Irish kept the faith. The Irish kept the Catholic faith. The clergy kept the Catholic faith. A lot, they stood their ground. You know, especially the Nugents, because then you have Robert Nugent, who was the head of the Jesuits in Ireland. Brian was mentioning to me the other evening, you know, they definitely stood their ground, whereas in England it was a very different situation, and maybe these miracles had a profound impact on them. You can think about this bishop if he's wavering. Because if he's struggling with his faith and he's seeing this host moving from one side of the altar to the other, and the barons, Christopher and William, looking at this, and the others in the church, and then the priest being brought in and taking the host. This is some story, and it's been confirmed by heretics who you could see it at the last piece of that text. I think it's fascinating. I think it's a fascinating story. Obviously, very, very close to my own family, very close to where I grew up, in a church where I was brought to as a child. And to see this text come out now is incredible. As Brian said to the other evening, and Brian he's a deep thinker, and he takes the time to meditate on these on history a lot more than I would. But he says, before we can have a cultural renewal or renew art, we need a religious renewal. Religious renewal that we need in Ireland is a renewal of the faith that teaches us union with God. You know, the St. Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, that mystic union with God. You know, and this really echoes William Nugent. My faith is mystic speech, I think is a quote from him. I'm paraphrasing it there, and it's a translation from Irish from one of his poems. But you know, the renewal of the faith in Ireland, the only way we will pass on the faith to the next generation is that the key that is that union with God, theosis deification. But anyway, fascinating, leaving it out there. And again, full credit to Brian Nugent for you know, giving me this text. He's done Ireland a great service, and I think he's really driving something here. He's really caught something here that you know, we need to take advantage of. Anyway, God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.